we are back with more NFL coverage, and to get straight into it, Noah Fant would officially sign with the Bengals last week. It makes just a tremendous amount of sense for both sides. I mean, Noah Fant is looking to at least provide good service on a team that he knows is going to need his contributions. And as I stated when last covering the situation with Noah Fant, that just wasn't going to happen in Seattle. As different tight ends from a few years back, and also this recent year with them getting Elijah Arroyo late, well, in the second round of the draft per se, his reps at the tight end position were just going to get shorter and shorter when you think about the share of them. So his time in Seattle was probably going to be coming to an end anyways. And there's a potential grand opportunity for him at this stage of his career in Cincinnati. I mean, to put it to you quite frankly, obviously Mike Gesicki is going to be holding it down as a top tight end on their squad. But behind him, at this position, you have here Drew Sample, who they did draft, and honestly, I even thought for a while he was going to be something. It just didn't end up happening. They could afford to move on from him. Eric All Jr. is also a younger tight end, but he's pretty unproven at this point. And to have Fant be there for at least a little bit of time and kind of pass that blend of speed and dexterity over to him would certainly help him. He's still a young tight end, and they've also got that Iowa connection, so it makes sense. And then they also have a player by the name of Cam Grandy here, who I'm not all that familiar with. Still, even he didn't have that many looks last year. And again, I don't think that Fant in all games can expect to really get a good amount of receptions and yards in. I mean, the primary guys are going to be Chase Higgins and Gesicki. Some nights even Yoshi Voss will get a greater percentage of the receptions and targets. But as a tight end to have in case Gesicki also gets hurt, because that was another thing too. Whenever Gesicki went down with injury, they didn't really have reliable backup plans. So if you can get Noah Fant to fill that role for you, which he certainly can, it's a virtually seamless fit. Obviously, at this time, Gesicki can do a little more for an offense than Noah Fant currently can. But there are some advantages Noah Fant does have on Mike Gesicki whenever he has to enter a game, like his speed. And, obviously, the rich get richer. Again, the Bengals can afford to make this move, on offense at least. It's not going to cost them too much money at all. And it just helps them get even deeper on that front. If only they had this same attention to detail on the defensive side of the football, who knows where they would be at this point of time when it comes to some of the other contracts they are currently needing to work on right now. Granted, keep in mind, I didn't say actively negotiating, because while there have been rumblings of it, they still haven't gotten this thing resolved. So that still, even with them making a move like this, if you can't get all your guys in check with deals, man, it's not going to be worth much of anything. Because Noah Fant can certainly ball out as a tight end too, with the offense still doing what they did last year. And they could still end up having the same end result if they don't get this shit together. Simply put, the Raiders would sign Kolton Miller, left tackle, to a 3-year, $66 million deal. And although, at least according to his All-Pro selections. He did make the first team All-Pro in 2021, but since then, he has yet to appear in that ranking. I mean, he's been a solid left tackle, to say the least. And again, while he might not be considered in the upper echelon of blindside tackles like a Rashawn Slater or Laramie Tunsil, you gotta take what you can get. At this stage of his career, he's not going to be like those guys, or even Tristan Wirfs Jr. at all, but it helps them retain some form of continuity in that locker room, because, the Raiders already in this offseason are going through a ton of change, as it is. Obviously, with them getting Geno Smith and bringing him over on a pretty sizable contract for a quarterback, getting Ashton Genty and Dante Thornton Jr. out of the draft, bringing over all of this talent and even losing guys over the course of the offseason as well, some pivotal pieces too. They wanted to ensure that, at least in this situation, Kolton Miller wasn't going to be one of those people. He's getting paid handsomely. It might place him on the fringe of a top 10 contract for left tackles in the league today. But the market, it's increased bit by bit, but it hasn't seen a massive boom yet. So this is a contract where the Raiders are just all around playing it safe, and barring any unforeseen circumstance that could potentially befall Kolton Miller, like an injury or something like that, as long as he's around, the contract is going to be worth it and continues to produce at a respectable rate, even if it doesn't warrant any recognition. I mean, he was certainly active. He played all 17 games last season and also accounted for just 5 penalties on his end. That's pretty good production in his case. So, $22 million a year. Again, if the market was exploding, then we'd really have a problem. But, that is not really going to move the needle at all. It will not come back to hurt them. And in the future, as some of these younger left tackles might see an increase in pay raise, I mean, Kolton Miller's contract would look outstanding in that climate. And that's what I think the Raiders had in mind when constructing this deal and negotiating with him. So, Kolton Miller, a lifetime Raider. He's been there since 2018. So, he at least gets to stay there for a few more years. And I believe with his contract negotiation, I can check real quick, but this extension comes at a pretty solid time, as I believe his other deal was winding down a little bit. Yeah, he had a 3-year, $54 million deal just a few years back. So this extension comes in at a pretty good point. This would have been the very last year of his deal. And so for the next 3 seasons, he'll have this extension in place, and he becomes an undrafted free agent at 34 in 2029. So, hey, man, that's definitely solid work on both sides. There has been an update on the Bengals' incoming stadium renovation. Per a report from NFL.com via the Associated Press, essentially what's going on is that a new stadium lease is in place for the Bengals, but they are reporting, the Bengals organization at least at this time, that they have yet to see it. The commissioners within the county in question that will see this renovation be put into place, they got a 2-1 vote in favor of approving the lease per this report. But the Bengals somehow, some way, didn't have a look at all the details, and they apparently didn't see the final version whatsoever. So they had to reconvene, and in the next few days, I suppose we'll hear if that has changed and if they are going to officially make a move on it. And if they do, well, it helps them not only secure all of the structures of this deal in terms of making sure that the county is putting forth their amount and the Bengals are putting forth their amount of money to contribute to the project, which for the Bengals, they would have to shell out $120 million to maintain and keep up with all of the renovations in the stadium. But apart from that, because it also pairs up with the lease, and if they can confirm this and sign off on it, they're going to be staying in this area for quite some time. As this quote states here, the lease would keep the team at their downtown home through at least 2036. It also includes 10 additional option years that could extend it through June 2046. Man. Again, I guess the plan would be in this case to, again, hopefully get it signed in the first place so that you don't run the risk of losing out on having the team in the area. Of course, that's the most important thing first. And from there, I guess, obviously, you're going to need to make sure that the renovations are up to par with the standards being set, honestly, in both cases. Obviously, the county wants certain stuff done to the stadium, but the Bengals, over the course of these next few years, are probably going to want their own alterations to be made within the stadium. So it's about making sure that it's all under the budget and making sure that it's in top shape without accruing a massive amount of money and damages over the course of this time. Also, when it comes to general performance in keeping the stadium around the area, obviously attendance is going to be a huge factor. Revenue from sales and tickets are going to be a huge factor. They have to make sure that they're still doing what they can. And to be honest, as long as you have some of the core pieces you do currently have on your team around, they're going to contribute greatly to that. So I don't think that should be a question here. But, it's just kind of tough because when you have this contract negotiation between them and Trey Hendrickson going on for this long, and then not to mention you are apparently not even looking at the final version. You didn't get your hand on this whatsoever, although everybody else seemed to. I don't really know how well that bodes for this contract at all. That's just not a good way to start off. If they're trying to call attention to something through a meeting or some other form of a written document, it would be imperative for you to check that out immediately, because all of that stuff could have major implications, obviously, on the bottom line as the owners may view it, but also just on the general infrastructure of the team in terms of how other things behind the scenes have been set up and things like that. You don't want any of that to get ruined because you're overlooking some of these details. So that is certainly going to have to shift around. it's just a bad start. It's a bad look. Obviously, they can shore things up, but yeah, that's just not a good look at whatsoever. I can't excuse that. In terms of contract negotiations, though, I mean, Trey Hendrickson is obviously not the only one, as we've reported at multiple points. Terry McLaurin is obviously seeking a new deal. He was paid 3 years and around $69 million a few years back. He's still on that deal, but obviously with the market increasing in literally just the past couple of off seasons, McLaurin is looking for a much-deserved raise, I would say, honestly. Like, he's got the career statistics, and he's proven himself to be a massive contributor to their success, especially on offense, no matter what quarterback has been there. Like, we are talking about a team who, at different points of time, had quarterbacks like Garrett Gilbert and Taylor Heineke and Kyle Allen even playing for them. And he still managed to put up consistent season after consistent season in the NFL. So I'm honestly not blaming him for taking the stances he has here. And, because they want to continue to keep playing around with him. Per him, actually, he stated recently that for at least a month, he'd heard nothing from the Commanders whatsoever. Like, he would be willing to negotiate, but he hadn't heard anything from them in a month, apparently. And if that is true, obviously he's the one dealing with all of this. So you kind of have to look at it with a bit of truth here. It's coming directly from the source who's going to be affected depending on how this goes. So if that is true, the Commanders have put themselves in a pretty awkward spot, and, with all of that coming down, things have escalated very fast. The two-time Pro Bowler would request a trade last week because he feels as though, like, even if, I might see a small increase in money, like, that's fine. But the fact that you don't even reach out to me and try to settle this man to man, he definitely did not like that from the Commanders whatsoever. And I mean, damn, like, you'd think that a player who has put together 5 straight 1,000-yard seasons and a career-high 13 touchdowns last year with the team would command a little more respect than that. Especially with the role he's going to serve on the team if he does stick around. I mean, yes, they recently brought in Deebo Samuel, but aside from that, all of their wide receivers are not really game changers like that in the greatest sense. I mean, outside of guys like Deebo Samuel Sr. and Terry McLaurin, you have a rookie like Jalen Lane. You have a second-year player in Jacoby Jones. Interestingly enough, that is pretty crazy that they share that name. But nonetheless, you have Noah Brown, who is still there, but not really a number 1 or 2 wide receiver. You have KJ Osborne now, but he's more of a slot guy, and even then, I question how he really operates there. You have Michael Gallup recently coming out of retirement, and even then, he has not ever in his career been that kind of elite wide receiver that will change an entire team's complexion. And they have other relatively unknown wide receiver prospects there right now. Like, and to be in that position where the Commanders might literally choose a newly acquired Debo Samuel Sr. who is around the same age, but obviously doesn't have the same kind of current impact and standing with the team right now as McLaurin does. You would choose him over Terry McLaurin? That's just a problem. That is a fundamental issue. And you would hope that it doesn't reach that point. But, hey, if they keep playing around, McLaurin, I guess, could follow through with a full-on trade. I think, though, that this is a leverage play. You know, like Terry McLaurin, obviously the frustrations are high, but he hasn't shown or said anything that would suggest that he would want to leave. Like, he wants to do as much as he can to stick around. And again, he was willing to negotiate during this time. Niggas just didn't pick up the phone. That's pretty crazy. But yeah, he wants to be as loyal as possible. I mean, he's right in the middle of his prime. And honestly, I don't think that there is another place he'd want to be at this point. Like, he may very well want to retire a Commander. So, it is unfortunate that things have to come to this, but, you know, by making this sort of move, it could pressure the Commanders into finally caving and making a clear-cut decision on extending Terry McLaurin to what he's worth. Even if it doesn't net him like the highest overall wide receiver contract in the league, because that's probably not what you're aiming for. At least something around, I guess, $30 million would probably be suitable for a player of his caliber. And depending on how he performs, well, I guess, honestly, I think Terry McLaurin's elite enough to make it there, but for a good portion of players around this time, especially at the wide receiver position, you'd be looking at your last major deal at this stage of your career. So, if you can't even come to terms on that with McLaurin, you probably don't deserve to keep him. And you just miss the point completely of all that he's done on and off the field for your organization in his career, even with the owner whose name shall not be mentioned presiding over that team. Like, he just means too much to that team. So it goes way further than just the money. Like, his influence throughout that entire organization is great. And in not recognizing that, you might have potentially made a fatal mistake. The University of Stanford would hire ex-Nike CEO John Donahoe as an athletic director for the team. And this has just yet another layer to it in terms of this offseason for the college. Like, they have just been making changes everywhere. You know, head coach out. In comes Frank Reich as an interim for at least the next year or so. And they'll probably be looking for another one. You have Andrew Luck obviously being sort of general manager for the program as well. And under his vision, they now decide to bring this individual in. Not all too familiar with him, but you would hope, obviously, with bringing him in as the athletic director and obviously being an ex-Nike CEO overseeing that company, you'd expect he at least has a plan to reform this entire team completely. And that he knows exactly who he should be looking for and what he should be looking for in terms of the other positions that are going to be serving under him during this time. Because, let's be honest, the last few seasons for Stanford in all of their sports have not been very good up to their standards whatsoever. And it's time, at least, with this offseason of change, to try to get back to those glory days once again. Because they just have to get back there. There is almost no excuse anymore. They desperately need to. Or when it comes to, recruiting and things like that, they're going to be getting even fewer looks than they already have over the years. Baker Mayfield would suffer a hand contusion during one of the practices in training camp. You hope that he can recover from that and do so well enough. Because, man, in reality, you just want to see him continue to keep this thing going. Like, he has completely rejuvenated his career and gotten a massive contract out of it. Literally, when he was stuck in 2022, I should say, with the Panthers and then the Rams getting him for just a single game, moving on from him. At that point, I don't think anybody could have envisioned this kind of comeback for Baker Mayfield, but he's more than done that. He's went through all of the trials and tribulations a quarterback probably could by this point of their career, and yet he's overcome them to this point, gotten the Bucs in prime position to be a consistent playoff contender, and he's been producing like a top 5 quarterback in the NFL over the past couple of seasons in Tampa Bay. So anything that could potentially hurt his chances to keep that positive momentum going sucks. This is probably a minor injury compared to some of the other ones that these players have been going through over the course of this training camp, though. But obviously, anything relating to an injury of the hand will be important for a quarterback. So, again, hopefully the proper work is getting done on it and he can have an efficient recovery from it. But, if he has to miss any time, that would certainly hurt the team, because he's just been a key piece for them, clearly, in this time. And, while they have a lot of the other talent there, it's going to be on his shoulders, depending on where they finish in the regular season and potentially the postseason. That is also the next challenge for Baker Mayfield as well, is to see just how far he can truly take this when making the playoffs. Is he going to have enough to consistently make deep playoff runs in Tampa Bay? He's definitely going to start hearing that noise if you go through multiple seasons with him not being able to accomplish that, because even in a shorter amount of time, Tom Brady was able to do it and get them a Super Bowl. Now, obviously, these are somewhat different circumstances. Baker Mayfield's got the time, but Tom Brady was deep in his 40s at this point, and he only needed essentially 1 year to get that done. So I don't know if the Bucs will win a Super Bowl at any point in these next few years, but again, it's really just about being along for the ride and seeing how far exactly he can take. Because through just sheer determination, you feel as though at some point Baker Mayfield might be able to find a way and do it. But we don't know right now. What we do know right now is that these trade requests are definitely ramping up a little bit, because things continue to escalate in Dallas, as on Friday, Micah Parsons would officially request a trade from there. To the surprise of a few people, and honestly, a lot of people, generally speaking, saw this shit coming. Because on one end, you have Jerry Jones, an 80 plus, I believe 89? Let me see, because I just want to make sure I'm right on this. Nonetheless, he's one of the oldest, yes, he is 83, or will be 83 years old in October. Literally one of the oldest figures in the NFL actively right now. Obviously, earlier today, there was news that former Bills head coach Marv Levy turned 100. He's not there yet, but he is certainly getting up there in age. And with Jerry Jones, with all of these damn trade negotiations over the course of the years, you just see him continue to try and employ these old, tried and true methods of his that are just outdated at this point. Like, they do not consistently work like he thinks. You know, he's just stuck in this cycle of trying to play hardball up until the very last moments with these players. And in at least the last half decade, he's ended up overpaying for these players more often than not. Yet he's thinking that he won just because he managed to get them back with a team. Like, okay, even if they re-sign, you got them for literally extremely high market value. Extremely high. And you just didn't have to. You just prolong these processes for the fuck of it. Like, if you're making these moves early on, and you handle the signing and negotiations of these contracts smoothly and far earlier than he normally does, these players would re-sign and they would still have the room necessary afterwards to make other game-changing moves elsewhere. Again, yeah, some people might think that their offseason was solid, but you probably could get yourself a better running back than the likes of Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams if you had more money to work with. And consistently resetting the market just to get these deals done is clearly not a sustainable way to build a roster. That's been proven for the Cowboys. Like, their offense will be sound, and they strung together 3 straight 12-5 seasons under Mike McCarthy, but they continuously stagnated when it mattered the most due to a lack of depth. And also the offense not being able to consistently bail them out. All of those playoff games and early exits saw them crumble at some of the most pivotal moments of the game. And at that point, with the offense not contributing like they would need to do in order to win, and with the defense obviously stagnating because they can't stop the run for shit, they'd lose badly. But that's who you have in Jerry Jones leading the show. And then on the other end, you have Micah Parsons. We already know about Micah Parsons' accolades, and, you know, I could obviously regurgitate the fact that he is on a similar pathway in his first 4 seasons of his career as Reggie White was, prior to him requesting a trade from the Eagles. And that's pretty crazy too, because a lot of people cite Reggie White for beginning this sort of trend in the NFL of different players, making free agency even more important than it used to be. Reggie White's move to the Packers was cited as a revolutionary one when it comes to that aspect of football in the NFL. And now, all these decades later, Micah Parsons, if the Cowboys are not careful, could follow the same pathway. But that aside, I'm not going to trend so far into his numbers, because here's another thing that Jerry Jones might truly not understand, and this is where all of the tone-deaf qualities of Jerry Jones come in. Micah Parsons is literally one of the more emotional players on that team, if not the emotional leader of that squad. Obviously, Prescott and Lamb are passionate about what it is that they do, and Prescott has definitely shown his vulnerability over the years through a number of different situations. That much is clear about both of them. But Parsons truly wears his heart on his sleeve. And if Jerry Jones paid any attention to how he operates on the field and off the field, he would know that firsthand and should know that firsthand. And yet you're making all of these different moves to potentially slight him. Maybe you could get away with it when dealing with Dak Prescott or CeeDee Lamb. But of course, Micah Parsons, with being a bit more of an emotional player, is going to take that as tremendous disrespect. And honestly, why shouldn't he? I mean, for crying out loud, you're doing all of this other stuff. You're paying Jake Ferguson to extend with the team. I may as well just pair it up because it fits right in with what I'm talking about here. The Cowboys would sign former left tackle Lyle Collins to a deal to bring him back to the team. You didn't have this man. You get him back in free agency and give him a deal, all before you even consider giving Micah Parsons the money he's owed. Like, that's just stupid. And you don't think he's going to take that as disrespect as a 26-year-old player who has done nothing but contribute for this team despite how bad their defense has been overall. Like, he's been that consistent. And he is a generational talent that you are about to lose out on because you want to play all these games. And Jerry Jones seems to be completely oblivious to this. Like, he still doesn't seem to understand for some reason. He thinks that he can just treat this like he has consistently. Literally, there was a report circulating around with his response to this. And you know what he tells Dallas fans in that moment? He tells them, don't lose any sleep over this. How do you expect them to not lose any sleep over this? Like, depending on who you ask, this is the best player on your team requesting a trade because you can't get out of your old traditions and shift into the new era of football entirely. You want to keep treating this like this is a game. He is dead serious. He wants what he's owed. He wants to get paid what he's worth. And he is more than obligated to do this. Like, this could be a leverage play, yeah, but honestly, knowing what we know about Micah Parsons, I don't think that this is fully going to go down like that. And even if Jerry Jones can say all this stuff, right, you have to at least take this in stride and try to really understand what would happen if you let Micah Parsons go. Really take this situation seriously and treat it as a true football negotiation instead of a form of entertainment to you. And honestly, even if it's not Micah Parsons that bucks the trend, sooner rather than later, these players, when it comes to them dealing with Jerry Jones' shit, they aren't going to keep taking it. Again, Lamb and Prescott might have a different temperament, but Parsons is one of those players that, again, if you have him on your team, he'll definitely uplift you with his emotion, but it'll definitely pain you if you have to experience that while being on the opposite sideline of him. And if there is a situation where he does get traded, I'm sure that Parsons is going to do everything in his power. Whenever his team, potential team, if he does get traded, faces off against the Cowboys, he would do everything in his power to spurn them completely. And Jerry Jones would have no one other than himself and his son to blame in this moment. So I would take this request very seriously. Even if you don't think that you're going to trade them, and they essentially came out and said it, they aren't willing to do so. Well, okay. If you're that serious about it, get it done. Stop tiptoeing around the subject and bringing in all this different talent that is far inferior, by the way, to what Parsons is at this point, and he hasn't even entered the prime of his career yet. They are inferior players to him, and you're handling those contracts first. Why? Why is that? It's just counterintuitive. And again, if it's Parsons or somebody else, Jones is not going to be able to play these games for much longer. Like, I'm just being honest here. Also on Friday, Keenan Allen would actually conduct a visit with the Chargers. Now, honestly, at this point, while Keenan Allen is going to enter the season at 33 years old, the Chargers have got to find a way to make room for him to be on the roster in some way, especially with them briefly re-signing Mike Williams and having him retire as a Charger. You'd want Keenan Allen to do the same thing, because I'm going to be honest, the Bears thought they were getting a good one in Keenan Allen. And I mean, honestly, he is still a good wide receiver, but it was a brand new situation entirely with a brand new quarterback, and it just led to a pretty underwhelming season. It's one of his least productive seasons ever as a receiver. 70 receptions for 744 yards is pretty underwhelming. Like, there were some abhorrent games in this season. Like, I can just look through this game log right here. Like, it was so rough for him. You would think that Caleb Williams and Keenan Allen would have the chemistry, but again, rookie mistakes are bound to happen in this overall, which is not something that you can truly account for. And there were multiple times where Caleb Williams couldn't find that connection with anybody, really. Even his own mates, like Roma Dunze, as a rookie. There were a lot of miscommunications throughout the year. So when you see these numbers, it's not hard to understand why they wouldn't bring, or why they would not bring Keenan Allen back. It's not hard to see that at all. It's not that he's bad, but clearly Caleb Williams has got to completely reconstruct his game, and he has to be able to build that connection with a lot of other younger talent. At this stage, Keenan Allen is looking to be on a contender as well. The Bears are simply nowhere near that. They can build into that with Caleb Williams if he does become a much better quarterback overall. But that's not their timeline right now. Their focus is clearly on developing Caleb Williams and the rest of what is a young team overall. Keenan Allen just doesn't really fit in that timeline. And even from his own standpoint, he doesn't want to spend the rest of his career waiting on a sort of rebuild or a development process. He wants to contend. And what better way to do that than to come home? Especially where you know that you're going to get a few more looks in this. Like, he had just one game last season, count it, one, with over 100 yards receiving. And that came on December 22nd against the Lions, where he had 9 receptions for 141 yards and a touchdown in a 34-17 loss. Outside of that, it was just a season that never really took off. I mean, he had a few 80-yard games here, and then in other circumstances, he had a stretch to open up the season. Not counting the 2 games he missed between the Colts and the Texans due to injury, he had 29 receiving yards, 19 receiving yards, 33 receiving yards, 41 receiving yards, 39 receiving yards, 36 receiving yards, 44 receiving yards, and 41 receiving yards in his first 8 games. Then got 30 receiving yards in another game, and then ended off the season following that game against the Lions with back-to-back 25-yard games, including that output on 5 receptions in a game that honestly I sat back as a Seahawks fan and was very excited about in terms of winning that game. But anytime you have a game ending in a 6-3 loss on a Thursday night, there are questions that need to be asked on both sides. And it was at that very point that the Bears knew that this season was a failure. That's just unacceptable. Like, the Seahawks weren't doing much on offense themselves, but anytime that your offense, even in the conditions that the game had, there was inclement weather, so I'll be fair, but it just was not a good look at all. Like, I vividly remember watching that game, and Keenan Allen was virtually a non-factor. Now, granted, you got to credit the Seahawks defense for making it that way. Best corners are going to match up on the better wide receivers of the team, and they did a great job of covering him. But at the same time, there were times where he had great looks, and even DJ Moore as well. Like, DJ Moore on a specific play was actually wide open for a touchdown, and yet Caleb Williams, due to internal pressure and all of the oncoming pressure from the Seahawks defensive linemen, he just missed him completely. That could have been one of the only touchdowns of the game, and they end up not even getting on the board at all. Then the one time he did hit him for a touchdown, it was overturned due to a penalty. So even when things were going right, there was always just something that derailed the progress of both the team and Allen's contributions as well. Now again, the Chargers are a bit more stacked at wide receiver now than in his last season there. But again, I'm sure that if they do actually re-sign him, they'll be able to incorporate him back in the offense. It's going to be harder for him to learn it because you're not dealing with Brandon Staley's bullshit. You have a new head coach in Jim Harbaugh. But still, I'm sure there's going to be a bit more of an adjustment there anyways. He'll be able to make it. You know, older players can learn new stuff every day. I'm not saying that at all. But he's got a ton of experience. with the team in general. So having that bug in your ear at the head coach position, while also having other players that you definitely have some connection with when it comes to Herbert, when it comes to some of the offensive linemen on the team, when it comes to a lot of the defenders at this point, they're going to be able to give you the advice you would need and all of the sort of details you would need on how some of these plays are run and how to bait certain defenders into biting on different routes. Like, keep in mind, Keenan Allen is still one of the best route runners with one of the best releases in the NFL. Even if he is getting up there in age. He has not lost that. Just because it was a struggle in Chicago doesn't mean that he can't recapture that in a setting that is conducive to truly winning football games. And while the Chargers need to establish that they can do that in the offseason, as far as the regular season goes, they'd be just fine with having Keenan Allen back. So I would certainly love to see it in a time in multiple sports, honestly, where players just seem to be reuniting with their original squads on a consistent basis. This would be the latest example of that, and a pretty damn good one, all things considered. Dolphins receiver and returner Dee Eskridge would suffer a hamstring injury. And again, typically with how these injuries go, man, it could derail his entire season. You would hope that it doesn't, because his role was already going to be a bit smaller on the Dolphins anyways. Like, ever since he's moved on from the Seahawks, he's just struggled to establish much of anything in his career at this point. And at the very least in Miami, if he would remain healthy, he would definitely be a solid return specialist. But a hamstring injury is just not a good sight for a player in Dee Eskridge's position. I mean, when you look at it, he is right around that point where most players aren't even able to be good contributors with their teams. Like, he is 28 years old and has barely done much of anything in the league to this point. You know, so it's definitely unfortunate for him to get hurt. And again, you combine that with him not really doing much of anything outside of special teams and a few offensive snaps here and there. Like, at any moment, it wouldn't take the Dolphins much of anything to move on from him. So this is really going to be a test on their end to see just how willing they are to retain his services. Because when you combine those two elements, the lack of production and the lack of availability here now, I mean, he played in just 6 games last year, and then also is getting hurt now, potentially missing the rest of this season. So I don't know how it looks for Eskridge down the line. The most important thing is that he recovers from it fully and speedily. But I don't know if the Dolphins are going to keep him. It'll be interesting to see if they do. But with the amount of wide receivers and the kinds of wide receivers that they already have on their team, they really don't have to if they don't want to. The Broncos, on the other hand, would sign a pretty important piece, as they would sign Zach Allen to a 4-year, $102 million deal. And it is well deserved. I mean, the Broncos have played this very smart when you think about it, because they already got the hard part out of the way by making sure that Patrick Surtain II was good and paying him his deal early rather than prolonging the process. And all Patrick Surtain II does last season is turn in a Defensive Player of the Year performance. But that timing of the deal allowed them to make other moves and get other players in position to perform and bid for their own contract. I mean, you look at the explosion that Nick Bonito had last season. You look at what Riley Moss was able to do alongside him. And now they were able to go out and get both Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga, despite still having Justin Simmons in free agency at this point. The fact that they were able to bolster that defense is a testament to how their front office has handled things. And all of that left room for Zach Allen to get paid after what was, for all intents and purposes, a career year for him last year. You know, I remember him being on the Cardinals roster, and he wasn't really a good player at that point. He was on the rise, but more of an expendable piece at that stage of his career. He comes over to the Broncos, and they actually get him to play on the inside as a defensive tackle. And what do you know, in that time, he gets a pass deflection, 8.5 sacks in the last season to go along with 61 tackles and 15 TFLs and 40 quarterback hits, while also forcing a safety. And as a result of that, he was a second-team All-Pro selection and also got a 14th place finish in Defensive Player of the Year voting. It was a masterful season from him. And you knew that coming into this, it would be crucial to try and secure him for the long term as a core piece of your team. Now again, giving him what is a $25.5 million deal is not going to make him a top 10 defensive player at all at his value when it comes to per year salary. Now maybe at the defensive tackle position, maybe. And honestly, with him seeing his numbers increase on a season to season basis in Denver, while also being right in his prime, this contract could look relatively cheap if he can maximize his potential off of this. You know, we'll see in the regular season, but he definitely shows a lot of promise for the future. And as a result, the Broncos are willing to capitalize on that. Chargers linebacker Denzel Perryman would be arrested on weapons charges. Now, I am not sure whether or not the matter has been resolved yet. This happened just yesterday. But it's just not a good look. Like, this is the time where in training camp you're trying to learn a pretty fresh defensive scheme. And in that situation, you're going to need all of your starting caliber defenders out there to learn it and just truly understand what exactly they're seeing so that that information can continue to be passed down. Like, even some of the rookies and younger players aren't necessarily going to get it on first try, but by having a veteran, an established veteran, like Denzel Perryman around, that could certainly help the matter. And yet that can't happen if you're out here getting caught doing that, it's like there's just no reason to do it. Obviously, he may have his own reservations, but I'm pretty sure that, again, as an NFL player, you're just not really supposed to be doing that shit in the first place. And I can't really speculate as to how the laws out in California are about it. But if they don't allow it, again, why the hell do you have them on you? It's just not smart. And, Denzel Perryman is certainly up there in age. Like, good and well, you aren't even supposed to be doing. Like, you're 32 years old, going on 33. You know what you're doing. There's just no reason to do it. Again, I'm sure he'll be able to get back to practice if it's nothing too major. But obviously, the repetition of cases like this can build up into something much greater. So again, just don't do it. Simply put. TJ Hockenson was apparently dealing with a groin injury in training camp, and that would just be a horrific setback. I mean, he already missed a good portion of time last season due to a lower body injury already. And when he is healthy, the 28-year-old, crazy to think he's already 28 years old, but he has been one of the more elite tight ends in the league when he's healthy. So you just hope that they can get a full season out of him. But again, if he's not able to be out there due to this, I really don't know how that would fare for their tight end room. Because, they have some solid guys, but obviously, Hockenson, when it comes to the tight ends on those roster, is in a tier of his own. So they just gotta do whatever they can to make sure he's healthy before the start of the season. And if he isn't, well, they're definitely going to be in some trouble. Obviously, McCarthy's set up in a pretty good system by having a player in Justin Jefferson already as a potential safety valve, but shit, TJ Hockenson would be a pretty reliable tight end to have also. So, I don't know how severe it is. They said he was limping. So, hopefully, by the start of the regular season, he can get healthy from it. Let's see. Now, I'm not all too familiar with this player here, but it was detailed that offensive lineman Dennis Daley would retire after 5 NFL seasons. Now, from what I'm seeing here, he has not played a single snap in the NFL since the 2023 season. And in that very season, he only played in just 3 games, while starting 1. That, logged a bunch of DMPs here, and then also ended up being inactive, maybe due to injury, for the rest of these games. Again, with other lines continuing to improve, even the Cardinals going out, getting Paris Johnson Jr. and continuing to bolster their own offensive line. The space on that team to find even a backup position at the offensive lineman position was just going to be difficult for him. And with no other team giving him a look, at the age of 28, going on 29 in literally just 4 days, he decided to call it a career. I don't know what things fare for him after this, but hopefully he could find way more success. As for the Bills, they are just dealing with a number of injuries. Most pressing is the fact that Maxwell Harrison is apparently dealing with a lower leg injury of some sort, which already hurts them tremendously on that side. I mean, the amount of potential he has just off of his combine performance alone is it definitely hyped up a lot of Bills fans and brass in the front office already. And if you have to lose him so quickly, that would just hurt their entire morale as it is. Not to mention as well, Khalil Shakir would also be diagnosed with an injury and would be treated on a week-to-week basis. Yeah, a high ankle sprain. So he's going to be week-to-week up until this gets resolved. Like, he recently signed a contract extension in the offseason and does look to be one of their better wide receivers that are returning. So it is crucial, more so than most people would think, to have him healthy and ready to go. And the fact that so many different players on that team right now are dealing with injuries is certainly unfortunate. Because no matter how good of a team you are, if you have all those injuries piling up, we've seen how they can just kill the momentum of a season. Literally just happened with the Lions. So hopefully they don't have to deal with the same slew of things. In terms of a few other news, Kenneth Walker III had people scared that he was injured. Like, they reported on something, stated that he might have been dealing with an injury, but they walked it back and stated that he was just getting a rest day, that he wasn't dealing with any setback of any injury. So that's good to hear. Also, just recently, Salvon Ahmed of the Colts would be carted off of the field with a severe right leg injury. That'll certainly derail something. And you hope that he recovers from this fully and speedily. But, man, that is certainly going to hurt their depth. I think Ahmed probably would have been like the third or fourth guy. But in a position that is as physically demanding as the running back position, you kind of need as many bodies as you can get, I will say. Now, obviously, Jonathan Taylor is a great running back, one of the best in the league. But there are going to be those moments where he does wear down a little bit. And you got to be able to rely on other people to step up and take the mantle. Obviously, Anthony Richardson could do that if he does start with him. But in terms of true running backs, you got to make sure that you have an abundance of them. Because if you're trying to win the war of attrition, in some cases it might come down to you having that advantage in that position in terms of the amount of players you have. And that goes for pretty much any important football position. Because, again, injuries are a part of the game. They're going to happen. They can't always be avoided. Like, they're going to happen. There's nothing you can do from that standpoint. But if you're consistently prepared for those moments, more often than not, you'll be able to withstand those kinds of situations and reach contention, maybe even win it all by the time a season's done. The 49ers would sign Robbie Anderson. I'm going to say Robbie Anderson. I'm not calling him that, but he would sign with them because they truly do need a lot of wide receiver depth, especially if Jaywan Jennings does leave. And again, I've detailed their situation already. It is literally just Ricky Pearsall and Jacob Cowing. Both of them are young. Pearsall has shown potential. Cowling is still relatively unproven because he doesn't have the reps. A lot of their other major pieces at the wide receiver position from last year have either been traded or are currently injured, aside from J1 Jennings. So they need to have backup plans. And what better way to do that than with a player like Robbie Anderson, who is proven to be a speed threat no matter what. Like, that's one thing you gotta give him credit for. He's retained that throughout his entire career, regardless of what team he's been on. And that is always going to help him get a job. This situation is no different. And it gives Brock Purdy, once he immerses himself in this offense, a good chance to start stretching the ball down the field a little more often, a little more so than he's typically accustomed to. I mean, obviously he could do that sometimes with Brandon Ayuk, but with Robbie Anderson's speed, he'll really be able to take the top off of a defense. And you can have him working over the top while Ricky Pearsall handles all those bread and butter in breaking routes that they run consistently, no matter who has been there at the wide receiver position for them. That would be perfect for their game plan. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.